Hi, Jesse. Still there. If I have to step back, do we have a quorum?
I'm not sure I'm following what's going on. Did we come back to the original meeting?
Yeah. You're in the Tremont
Yeah.
password. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
One that was on the agendas.
Yeah. That's good.
Hello, awesome.
All right. Are we all here? We need Marjorie, right?
Marjorie
There
is
she
right there.
Okay.
I'm just waiting. Jan. Yeah, Jan's here.
I don't see Jeff.
Jeff Crafts hasn't made it back on. I'll text him.
How about Lawson?
Lawson said he'd be late.
And we can start the meeting, Jesse, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. After a difficult start, we'll call the Tremont Planning Board meeting of March 9th, Tuesday, March 9th, to order at 6:13. And folks, please acknowledge when I call your name that you're here. We'll do the roll call. Marjorie Buck.
I'm here.
Okay, Jeff Young.
Present.
Brett Witham.
Here.
Myself, Mark Good, I'm here. And we have Code Enforcement Officer Jesse Dunbar and Recording Secretary Jan Sprague somewhere here, I guess. And
I
members
think
of the
she's the
public.
iPad.
Oh, she's the iPad. Okay. Members of the public. Okay. I guess Lawson's going to be late. So I don't think we need to excuse any absences. You agree, Jesse?
I agree.
Okay. If he doesn't show up in a little while, we'll revisit that. Let's go to the minutes of February 23rd. Did anybody see anything?
I move that be approved.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second for discussion. I see two misspelled names, and it's interesting. It's the names of the two that just made the motion and the second. Down under approval minutes, we have number 5, Margie Buck and Go F Young.
I've been called much worse.
So I take amend the motion, please, to change those names, correct the names.
I move that we change those names to the proper spelling.
Amend the motion
Amend the motion.
and change it, yeah. Because you had a motion and a second on the table.
Okay,
You didn't make the motion, Jeff did?
Jeff did.
Yes.
Where's Jeff?
I'm right here. You want me to move the
Yeah, to amend it and fix that, please.
amend to correct the spellings of the parties involved?
We have a second?
Spelled right, is it? I second it.
Okay, motion and second on the table to approve the minutes of February 23rd as corrected. All in favor, Marjorie,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Brett,
Aye.
myself, aye. Okay. New business. Pre-application conference, Pointy Head Campground. Jeff, you tell us what you're doing. We don't have any information, not even a sketch plan or concept.
Well, thank you, Mark. The way I understand the ordinance is that you come in here without that, there's no application on the table. And this is like a sketch plan review where you might scratch it out in front of you guys. So, but honestly, this application is going to come back to you and it's going to look a lot like the first one. But I want to go through tonight on those items that you did not find us in compliance, and see what I can do to make a better presentation next time, what I need to include to get those ones correct.
How are you gonna get in? What's your access?
We have site access,
Through?
the existing site.
Mr. Chairman, if I could. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ed, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Ed Bearer, and I'm assisting the applicant, Madeline, with this application. Following the review in front of your board and then in front of the Board of Appeals, we revisited the access issue, in particular, the zoning requirements in your land use ordinance. We had a, excuse me, we had a conversation with the DEP. Your code officer was part of that conversation. We have a letter now from the DEP saying that under your ordinance, we can use that road to access non-maritime activities. And Jesse has a copy of that letter. If you could make it available to the board members, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll certainly forward it to all of you in advance of our application being filed. But the disconnect the first time around was that the DEP was not looking at your ordinance when they rendered their opinion. They were looking at a model ordinance, and yours differs from the model ordinance in a way that makes this particular parcel in the Commercial Fisheries and Maritime District available. You can use the existing driveway for any purpose that you want. It doesn't have to be maritime related. But again, we have a letter not just from the DEP, but from the Attorney General's office confirming that. So that's our intended access.
Okay. Jesse, if I recall correctly, I thought the DEP did quote our ordinance, but
No, they apparently were looking when they made their determination the first time, not realizing ours differed from theirs on that line item.
Do they spell out in the letter where we differ in our ordinance versus their standard language?
I believe so. I'm not sure if it speaks directly to that, other than making the statement of why they believe it's an allowed use.
Do they state why? I mean, is it like a hardship or anything that
No.
stated?
No, there's no hardship. It simply is a permitted use. Since you don't have the letter, it's dated February 5th, 2021. It's a little more than a page long. I could read it to you if you'd care to hear it, but it probably would be more fruitful if you all simply received a copy of it. But there's really no question that the access road is permissible for us to use for any purpose.
Does the town have the ability to be more restrictive, or is the state controlling in this position?
The town can be more restrictive than the state. It can't be less restrictive.
But it can't be more restrictive unless its ordinance is drafted in such a way, and your ordinance is not.
Correct.
In your opinion?
I'm reading from the AG's letter.
Oh, see, I don't have the letter.
I'm not trying to argue with anybody. The question was asked, what's our access? And I tried to explain it, nothing more than that.
any other questions or comments on that, folks? Well, Jeff, go ahead. Tell us what else.
Okay, there were 4 things that were turned down, if I can use that term. And I'll read them and then go back to the top. It was buffering and natural features, stormwater, shoreland relationship, and site access. We just discussed site access. I'll end with that if there's any other questions, but I'd like to start with the buffering natural features. First and foremost, along the site access. that sort of came up at the end of the evaluation that we needed to screen that gentleman's yard that did not want to have the headlights in his face. So we would like to respond to that and do something along the site access way to shield his house. And what we've considered internally is a very nice formal looking fence. But this is where we'd like to hear from the board to see if a fence would be adequate in this case, so we can submit it to you with all the rest of our application. That's what this workshop is for. So I'm talking about on the south side of the access road and the north side of the Gott property. We want to be able to buffer that using a fence. Any comments on that, Mark?
Well, I guess what you're looking for here, Jeff, is for us to say, yeah, that would be fine. But that's not my understanding of the intent of a pre-application conference.
And what is the intent if you can't
Well-
help us make our decisions?
Well, for one thing, you just say fence. That's doesn't mean anything until we actually see a plan of some kind and see how it fits into or the setbacks from the fence and away from the buffering from the property, things like that.
But you do agree that the ordinance allows for a fence in this case?
I don't
So
know
would-
that. I don't know that right off.
Okay.
Jesse, or somebody else might want to weigh in.
Mark, I thought we were not going to discuss anything unless we had it all written down in our packets each week.
Well, Marjorie, we forgot one thing. You're in a butter, so you should recuse yourself, please.
Ah. Okay, I'm recused.
Unfortunately, the ordinance in terms of, I'm looking it up here,
Page
pre-application,
32. Oh, sorry.
pre-application process. Is that what you're looking at? I was looking at,
No, I was looking at buffering. Sorry.
oh, no. It says, prior to submitting a formal application, the applicant or her representative may request a pre-application conference with the planning board. Said request shall be made in writing to the board secretary at least 14 days prior to the date of the meeting. Oh, was that done?
Mhm.
We're here, aren't we?
Did you get it within 14 days?
Yep.
Okay. Applicant shall provide the planning board with whatever information relative to the proposed project is available at the time of the pre-application conference. The pre-application conference shall be informal and informational in nature. There shall be no fee for a pre-application review, and such review shall not cause the plan to be a pending application or proceeding under Title I MSRA 302. No decision on the substance of the plan shall be made at the pre-application conferences. So it sounds to me you're asking us to make a decision on the substance of the plan.
I understand your position, Mr. Chairman, and I don't think that we're looking so much for any decision by any stretch. I think that maybe, and Mr. Crafts can speak for himself, what we're asking is if we have a common understanding of your ordinance, which is that it allows fencing as a means of buffering or screening. I think that's all we're asking for in this particular aspect of our application. My understanding is that the application that we intend to submit will look, for all intent and purposes, like the one that we had submitted before, except that we are going to beef up those areas where you found it to be lacking, and assume that with this meeting, we'll have a better sense of whether we're going to be able to meet that standard or not. We don't really have much question about the stormwater. We can re-engineer that. The question of buffering is one that we just would like a little bit of feedback on before we submit our application to you, with the hope that we're having a common understanding of what we need to do or can do under your ordinance to provide buffering.
Well
That's all.
said, well said.
I believe fences are
And I'll
allowed.
just-
What page is that again, Jesse?
32.
32 of the land use goes over the buffering.
When you're looking for wooden fences is permissible, but it's to our discretion based upon whether it meets the other performance standards. So it's going to be difficult to say here tonight that what fence is being proposed would meet the performance standards we called for under the other sections of the statute, in my opinion.
And what are those performance standards?
They're spelled out in the statute.
This is Brett. I'm going to take it up a level higher. As I recall reviewing this application, one of the things that was a challenge, at least from my perspective, was that it wasn't clear actually what you were proposing, because, there were some examples of a platform. Maybe there was going to be a cabin here. Maybe there'd be a tent here. Maybe there's this many cabins now. There's maybe some more in the future. It made it difficult for the board, even considering buffering, for example. We don't know what we're buffering against. Like, it wasn't clear to me exactly what you were doing. And then there were some other things. When you submitted information about what the platform looked like, and then we went on the site, it was completely different than what was submitted. So it really, from my perspective, the real challenge was not understanding what the project was, because it wasn't really a concrete project that was set in time, explained clearly, and said, this is it. It sort of morphed throughout the process, and we couldn't really pin it down.
Brett, could I respond?
Thank you.
Absolutely. But from my perspective, that's what made it hard, I think, for people to apply, to really wrap their heads around what it was, because it changed.
I think everybody on the board shares that feeling, Brett.
And I felt the same way as an applicant. I did. I felt that I put something on the table initially, and that continued to morph as the desire of the planning board. The platforms are a perfect example. I was asked to label them on the plans. I labeled on the plans. And then I was asked to draw a picture of one. Meanwhile, a month goes by and we're just making changes meeting by meeting. So I felt the same way as an applicant. Constant change.
Well, the constant change was because we were asking you questions. And so then you were trying to sort of backfill the application because it wasn't clear what we were looking at. So don't flip. Don't flip it on. Don't even try.
No, but nobody was able to point to the ordinance and say, Mr. Crafts, this is part of the ordinance where you should be paying attention. It was make it up as you went along.
Yeah, on your part, it seemed like.
Yeah, you did do that.
And I felt the same about you guys.
Well, it's fine, but it's on the applicant to submit a proper application. We have before us another campground application, or we're going to, came to the pre-application conference with a lot of details on what they're proposing to do. And now tonight you come to us with no information at all. You haven't provided us even the concept plan, a sketch plan. We don't know what you want. Except you want us to tell you that, oh, you can go ahead and do this buffering fence, and we don't even know what it's going to look like.
I don't, Mr. Chairman, again, I don't mean to speak for Mr. Kraft. I don't think that we're asking you to pre-approve anything sight unseen, certainly not. And I'm hearing what Mr. Witham is saying, and hopefully our application this time around will be more definitive, and it won't alter much throughout the review process, because it won't have to alter much. Hopefully it will meet all of your standards and there won't be any question about that. I was late to the game, obviously, but it appeared that we met the standards for a dozen or so of your review criteria and didn't meet the standards for 3 or 4 of your criteria. We think the access issue has been resolved, and we'll present more on that when we file our application, but you've heard the explanation. I think we're getting the feedback that we were looking for. We're certainly not expecting you to agree to anything tonight, and anything that you provide for feedback is simply going to be helpful to us in submitting an application in a couple of weeks for your review sometime in April. I take what Mr. Witham says to heart, and we'll certainly work with Jeff to provide you with as detailed and definitive an application as possible. And in fact, to be candid, we had a conversation earlier this afternoon with a client, and one of the things we discussed was being very specific and very detailed in what it is that we're going to be proposing for our development. Describe these features, show them pictures, show them drawings, whatever we can right out of the gate, and respond if necessary to your feedback, whatever that may be. Hopefully we'll be close to the mark, if not on the mark, with what we do submit. But our primary objective here tonight was coming to you with an expectation, or at least an understanding, that you have a general idea of what we're proposing without seeing anything in front of you. It's not going to be different in kind or different in its layout than from what you had seen before. Rather, our submissions are going to be improved when it comes to buffering and screening. So we were hoping for a little bit of feedback so that we could be close to correct when we submit something. And we wanted to have a dialogue regarding stormwater runoff to see if we understand what the board's concern was with what we had submitted before, because we're prepared to meet our critics' concerns by doing a broader stormwater analysis of the entire site rather than just that portion being developed or whatever their concerns may be described as being. So we're not trying to put you in a box where we come back next month and say, but you agreed to this or agreed to that. We're just looking for some feedback. Honestly, I guess our working assumption was that the board members were familiar with this project because you had reviewed it last year. And if we assume too much, then we certainly apologize for that. And we appreciate the board's time and its effort with us this evening. And if you can give us a little bit of feedback on the stormwater issue, I think that we will have taken enough of your time, and we'll move on and submit an application in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think, Jeff, be prepared. You have to pay the $500 performance fee again. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Okay, and be prepared to have a peer review of stormwater and maybe some other things as well.
Certainly, I would like it if we could discuss it tonight and see what you have for issues with it. Are you still there, Mark?
I'm still here, yeah.
Okay.
What do you want to discuss?
Well, I thought you'd say go ahead and discuss the stormwater.
It's a little Jeff, it's a little frustrating, okay, because this happened months ago, okay?
Yeah.
I don't think any of us remember details of your stormwater plan, and I doubt if we all remember details of what the other engineers were even saying about it. We were relying on other experts, so it's kind of hard for us to say right now, at least in my mind. I don't know how other people feel.
I agree, Mark.
You know that was an issue originally. So you say you're going to develop a new stormwater plan? Fine. When you do your application, bring it to us. And then we'll put it through a peer review, probably, if we vote on that, and go from there, make decisions from there. We're not stormwater management experts here.
Then why are you able to make a decision?
Who said that?
Talking.
Who was that?
I don't know.
Whoever that
Somebody
is doesn't
ESL
understand
6.
whoever that is doesn't understand how it works. What we did was we had an expert come in and look at it and provide an opinion to us. That's what you do. That's how it works. This is hilarious.
If I could come back and just discuss the buffering for a moment to give you some guidance. So I feel for your frustration and so forth. I know buffering was an issue for me on your first application, but more importantly, it was an issue for many of the neighbors that spoke and were at the site visit. And so you need to look at our statutes and think about a very adequate plan that the neighbors will be protected from impact, whether it's light, sound, noise, whatever it is coming off the activities you're going to have in the premises. So I don't think it's that difficult to figure out what the neighbors were saying, what we were saying as to our concerns about buffering. And I think since we're dealing with a area which is mixed zoning and there's a lot of residential, buffering is a very important issue. And so I hope that helps you a little bit what I'd be looking for, and I'd be listening for when the public speaks as to what their concerns are, what you propose in your plan will adequately buffer them from impact from the activities on your property.
Jeff, thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. And it is the guidance that we need, because sometimes the ordinance, in the things that we failed on or were marked down on here, the ordinance really doesn't jump up and said, thou shall do the following things. There's a lot of opinion that's rolled into these 4 items, and we're just trying to get it right sooner rather than later this time. We're trying to do it right. And that goes for the buffering, the stormwater, shoreland relationship, all those things. We'd like to hit the nail on the head as soon as we can without a lot of repeat, and, drag it out with you guys and drag it out with the public. So thank you.
And
Jeff,
we, the
to
board,
build on what Jeff Young said about buffering, I know one concern was the tent platforms, some which we never did get an actual height on some of them, but some maybe as much as 10 feet high, and whether buffering that you propose would actually buffer that from the neighbors.
The tent platforms range between 4 feet and 8 feet.
Is that going to continue?
Yes.
And I gather that it'll
And the plan will show which platform is going to be which height?
Yes. I remember that from the last time as a critique.
okay, again, coming back on the things like buffering, you come in with your proposal. We're a planning board, so we're supposed to sit and help plan. And so we're not here to be your adversary. We're supposed to be taking the town through a planning process of your activity.
Yeah.
So if you come in, you revise your plan, you come in buffering and you say, I'm going to put in 8-foot trees here. Our role could be, if you went to 9-foot trees there, I think the town residents could live with that. And so it's not like sending you home and saying you have to start over again. We're doing our job of help plan what will fit into that neighborhood.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Jeff.
I think, Mr. Chairman, we've gotten the feedback that we were looking for tonight, and we'll submit a robust application, and we'll begin that review process with you as soon as we can.
Okay, we appreciate that. The more details you can give us, Jeff, the better.
I'm sure I'm going to try, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Let the record show that Lawson Wilson has joined us. Hi, Lawson.
Hi, everybody, and sorry I missed the first part of the meeting. Got here as soon as I could.
Jeff, was there anything else? Crafts, anything else?
No, I'm good, and I thank you all for your time tonight.
Great.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you.
before they leave, Mark, I was going to bring up, we have 2 campground applications that are going to consume a fair amount of time, of our time. Can we sort of have Jesse and you coordinate the calendaring of these so we don't have them both on the same night?
I think that'll work, Jesse.
I just want Jeff Crafts to hear that we got to work around the calendar thing. So, you know, we're not fighting you there. We got 2 big projects we're looking at. They're going to be time consuming. Yours. And
I
yeah.
actually mentioned that today in the private meeting that we had amongst our own team. So I said there's 2 of us out there now, not just one of us. So I recognize that and thank you.
Okay. Anything else, anybody? Otherwise, we'll move on. Continued discussion of proposed ordinance changes, land use ordinance and site plan review ordinance, and the definition discussion with our town attorney, James Collier. Hi, James.
I have arrived.
Is your microphone on? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I just checking to see that it's on.
Yep,
So-
gotcha. Maybe you could tell us, I looked at your memorandum, and I was a little confused in one way. So there will still be definitions in both the site plan and in the LUO?
Yes.
Okay,
So the memorandum, if you get all 3 documents out at the same time, is probably the easiest way to go through it.
yep,
And keeping in mind that the way to look at this is to look at the site plan review ordinance as the primary document. That's the one we're looking at. So the land use ordinance, I'm not really, changing it that much, okay? So in most cases, as I mentioned to you last time, if there was the similar definition in the land use ordinance, or if the term was used in both places, my recommendation would be to simply move it to the land use ordinance. So you see that, I don't know if you want to discuss each one, but you see that in the first 3 or 4 there in the memo.
right,
Then if you look at the word arterial, that's a weird term. There's a whole discussion about collector streets and arterial streets, but it's a term that's only used in the site plan review ordinance. So I left it there because it's only there. Then there are a couple of big items. The big items are the word building versus structure. I have no idea why that's used.
mm-hmm,
In my 2 decades of doing zoning stuff, people always talk about structures, but the people that drafted this ordinance said building. And really, there's a scale of review that's beyond what you asked me to do, but if you want to, you should go in it sometime and really look at whether you want to have buildings or structures and then change it. There's many places where you could change it. So that's one of the 2 big changes. The other big one is in the concept of substantially commenced, substantially completed, commenced. Those are all words that it means significantly different things in each ordinance. And I think those are things the board should look at. The other stuff in the memorandum, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. I moved everything I could to the land use ordinance unless it was only used in the site plan review ordinance. If there was a similar definition in the land use ordinance and one in the site plan review ordinance, I got rid of the one in the site plan review ordinance. But those are the only big things.
okay. Comments, anybody? Questions? So what do you need from us tonight? Just to okay what your changes?
Well, I think if you're going to go ahead, then you would okay them. I do think you either can do it now or later, but you need to give some thought maybe you just want to pass the buck for now on the concept of building versus structure. And then if you want to discuss this matter of commenced, substantially commenced, or if you, that's a big discussion, or it could be a big discussion, I don't know. But that is important in many contexts because, you know, when you commence the construction means that you're vested, and then there's some rights that attach to it, and there's some, it's an important thing.
Well, the substantially commenced, substantially completed definition seems pretty clear cut to me. What don't you like about it?
It's not that I don't like it, it's just that it's different in each ordinance.
Oh, I didn't think the LUO even had that. I thought it had. Oh, maybe. What is it in the LUO?
Commenced.
Just commenced, okay.
I think they're pretty different.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
And so that's something, you know, if you're gonna tackle that tonight, fine, but you need to figure out what you want to do.
What do you think, board? Well, Marjorie, you're welcome back, by the way, now. I'm sorry.
I said I'm already lost.
So the two terms are commenced and substantially commenced. So in the land use ordinance, it's commenced, and in the site plan review ordinance, it's substantially commenced, substantially completed.
I would take,
Delighted that we were.
if we're making a choice, I'd take substantially word out and go with the other definition.
So you're suggesting get rid of commenced in the LUO and just add these substantially commenced, substantially completed in the site plan. Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
No, I'm suggesting removing the word substantially.
So
Or
just
just the word?
Yeah. Well, taking the definition, it does not have substantial in it. Doesn't
Yes.
that work?
So presumably what you're doing then, because just alone when it says commenced, that's going to be earlier in time than substantially commenced.
Right.
Substantially commenced is almost an oxymoron. It's like
Right.
done a lot, but you've just started.
Yeah. It's like, I'm like really, really, really pregnant, or like I'm substantially pregnant versus pregnant.
Yeah, but what I don't know is
disagree. I disagree.
Congratulations, Lawson.
Yeah, by why?
I don't want to talk about biology, but there is a difference in zoning law between commenced and substantially commenced.
I agree. And that's why I don't know the reason for that. Like, I don't know why. You know, can you help us understand why those?
Sure. So if you get a project and you get a permit and you commence, well, yeah, you did anything. You started. You went out and you turned a shovel full of dirt. The idea, I think, is in reference to contract law consideration, material change in position, and that you did something to get started on it. Usually I think the traditional thing was you poured the foundation. Some people say the footer, some people said the whole foundation. And then that meant that your project was there. And then if there was a delay and you didn't get it finished, you could go into the code enforcement officer and you could say, well, hey, I started it. I substantially started it. Can we let it sit for 2 years? So for example, right now on Eagle Lake Road, very close to my house, the lot was cleared of a previous house. There's a foundation poured, and they're trying to sell the land with the new foundation. Looks crazy, but there's a sign on it. They want 300,000, or a minuscule lot with a foundation. But the reason they can do that is because it's more than commenced, it's substantially commenced. So it is an important distinction. As well, when you're substantially completed is important too. But this is really a headache for the next code enforcement officer. Jesse, as long as he's code enforcement officer, but it's important to them.
It looks to me like the definition in the land use ordinance, the definition, even though the word is different, the definitions are the same, where it talks about beyond the stage of excavation. And it looks like that's the same as the site plan review.
Similar.
And so it sounds to me, James, like our definition of commenced is not
Yeah, it's not different, even though you would think they would be.
right.
So maybe the word, you know, I don't guess I'm ambivalent about it if they're the same, but you know, maybe you keep the substantially modifier because it is, you know, more than just, you know, put some pins in the ground or something, you know. Or I don't know. I guess I'm ambivalent, but I agree, Lawson. They're essentially the same. So we could just either put the word substantially in front of both, or as Jeff suggests, remove it and just have it as commenced in both. And then because they're effectively the same conceptually, the definition.
James, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, that's fine. The board can do whatever it wants. I want you to also be aware of the term in the land use ordinance under substantial start. So the land use ordinance has commenced and it has substantial start. And substantial start says completion of 30% of a permitted structure or use measured as a percentage of the estimated total cost.
I think that points to going into Jeff's route, which is removing the substantial from the site plan.
Right. Well, my general rule then would be to just take it out altogether in the site plan review ordinance.
Yeah, just refer back to the land use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then go back to the site plan review ordinance and change any little words where it's substantially commenced versus substantial start and make the two of them simpatico.
We just need to be very confident that we're not changing any meaning here.
It's challenging. That's an excellent point. There's also a, I don't want to confuse Marjorie again, she was confused earlier, but there's an expression in French which is pare, and it means parallel, but it's not the same, it's parallel. And that could be okay if they're similar enough that they're heading in the right direction. And when I looked at these, I threw up my hands after a while because the concept, I'm not sure if it was intended to be the same in each ordinance. Jesse, do you know any more than I do?
I do not.
Because right now they're not the same, right? Because substantially commenced, when any work beyond the state of excavation, which is similar to commenced in the land use ordinance. But then the land use ordinance is substantial start, and that's 30%. Well, you could get the foundation in, do the excavation, get the foundation in, but you might not have 30%.
Right.
That's the problem, I think, Brett, they're similar, but they're not the same.
Well, they're similar in the sense that they both say any work beyond the stage of excavation, right? I mean, that's the baseline to me.
That's the baseline for commence and in the land use ordinance, it's substantially commenced in the site plan review ordinance. But in the land use ordinance, then it says substantial start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it refers to the 30%. Now, Jesse, I think there must be a reason why you have substantial start. There must be a reason that's there.
To me, 30% along is further along than commence.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
So I haven't gone through and done a word search to see why we slice and dice it that way.
And it really places the onus on Jesse to determine what 30% completion is, correct?
Yeah, it has to be. I think I've done it before, and it's 30% of the estimated cost of the project. So,
And if we look at substantially completed, to me, it's more clear about when you reach that point as compared to 30%,
right.
considered to be substantially completed when it has been completed to the point where normal functioning, use, or occupancy can occur without concern for the general health, safety, and welfare of the occupant and the general public. I mean, does it make sense to use substantially completed instead of substantial start or not?
Substantial completion is another matter altogether.
Yeah, that's
So substantial start, I was just looking through the land use ordinance. It looks like commencement is only used for buffering. That your buffering has to be in place before the project commences.
That's correct.
Whereas the building permit, the permit lasts or like is
Right.
good.
The life of the permit.
The life of the permit lasts until substantial start.
Right.
Or I mean, the permit lasts longer than that, but that's linked to that. And I'm not sure if that distinction, if that, I mean, it would be a substantive change. So I'm not saying that we should make that change right now, but it doesn't. I'm not sure that it's useful distinction.
In the land use ordinance, the word commenced actually does not come up, only commencement.
Right.
So-
Even though it's, which isn't defined.
Yeah.
So we could leave it as is in the land use ordinance, both of those terms, and that would be fine. Then our question would be, what do we do with the site plan review ordinance?
how is substantially commenced used in that ordinance? I don't have a version I can search.
Once it's approved, construction must be substantially commenced within 12 months of the date of approval after site plan.
And then in the land use ordinance, it really just refers to when buffering needs to happen.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean,
Substantially completed is only coming up in the definition section in the site plan. Yeah, that's the only place it comes up in the definition.
What about substantially commenced?
Sorry, construction must be substantially complete within 24 months of the date of approval.
Okay, how about in the site plan substantially commenced? Where is that popping up?
It's not, it's commenced.
Oh, it's just commenced?
Yeah, then it's a substantial start.
I mean,
In site plan?
No,
No,
site
in
plan.
the land use ordinance.
I think Brett said S in site plan.
Site
Oh, I'm
plan.
sorry.
Site
In site
plan,
plan, it's construction must be substantially commenced within 12 months.
and then complete within 24.
Okay.
Complete in 24.
And of course, that section on page 25 under Article 10 that Jesse's reading from, the construction must be substantially commenced. That in the land use ordinance would be, there must have been a substantial start. That meaning of substantially commenced is the same as substantial start in the land use ordinance.
Well, then we've got bigger problems then.
That's right. That's why I threw up my
Can't-
hands after
This isn't.
an hour, and I was very frustrated.
Yeah, this isn't a quick fix, guys.
No,
I mean, we definitely need to bring it into alignment. There's obviously conceptually these things. I mean, I get it conceptually. They're just care wasn't taken when they were laying out the definitions. And so there's some overlap, but at least one of the terms is overlap that frankly makes it the two regulatory schemes ambiguous, kind of at odds.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the challenge would be, this is as big a job as the whole memo that I did, to just synchronize these two terms. And I'd have to work with Jesse and make sure they're right. It's very important.
Yeah, and what's the rule? I mean, it's one thing to clean up little nits and make little changes, but at what point does it need to go to the voters? Like, it's not like we're not like a legislative body.
This is all gonna have to go to the voters. Any change we make goes to the voters.
Right, but our previous discussion, sorry to interrupt you, Brett, but our previous discussion was we were gonna do, not major policy changes.
Right.
And I think both this and the other thing I mentioned are policy type things that I want to avoid.
Yep. So I think we just gotta, I don't know. I think we just gotta leave him for now.
Yeah, James, you alluded to this. So what's the pitfall for the code enforcement officer if we leave it the way it is?
Well, the only difference I think is, and I don't know, but I don't know if there's a difference, but in Article 10, it talks about 12 months substantially commenced and then substantially complete within 24. I don't know if that's the same as the land use ordinance.
It's not the same because it says you have to substantially start, which is 30%, so it's a higher bar within 1 year of the building permit. So that's the other tricky thing, is the land use ordinance is based on the building permit, the issuance of the permit, versus the approval of the site plan. But
So the land use ordinance is more restrictive, Lawson?
that's correct. And so I think that, that's okay. It's confusing and it's annoying, but it's totally enforceable by the CEO.
Right.
So to answer Mark's question, that's the danger. It's confusing to the applicant, which sucks. If you're an applicant, that sucks. Because it's confusing. You don't like confusing stuff. You want stuff to be clear.
Right, but not everybody with a building permit is going to go through site plan review.
Correct.
Right.
And so for most people, it's not confusing. They're just following the land use ordinance and they have to make it 30% through within 1 year. And for those people who are going through site plan review, yes, the code enforcement officer's job is a little harder because there's this thing there that says you have a year to start, a year to commence. But actually, that doesn't really apply in Tremont because you actually have to be 30% through within a year. So we should fix it eventually, but I don't know if it's an emergency.
The answer is this slight confusion, but I think if Jesse's handling it so far.
What's interesting is that
fix it right now.
The flip side, the land use ordinance is less restrictive when it comes to completion.
Yeah, tell me about that.
It gives you 5 years to complete from the effective date of the permit.
That makes sense to me, though. To me, that makes sense because in the site plan review ordinance, you have bigger projects and you want them completed faster. Because they're more injurious potentially to the neighborhood. They're bigger impact. So I know Jesse's.
Yeah, great. So for completion, that makes sense. It's just that the site plan should probably be, I don't know, maybe the site plan should have a more aggressive start date as well. But
maybe,
but that would be a substantive change that we'd have to figure out.
I think when you dive into this, as you can see, this whole area is a substantive change and an important one.
Yep.
And I think you got to do some heavy thinking on it. And then your code enforcement officer should really be the one to give you recommendations, not me.
So the question in my mind is, can we live with this for now and address it later? We were talking about possibly going back at the November elections and trying to make some other changes as well.
Well, and were we at some point talking about like folding them into one document? Is that still on the table as a long-term solution?
I think so, yeah.
I think so.
Only makes sense.
And I'm not sure that would necessarily solve it, but at that point, we would want to make sure that it's all reconciled, so.
What do you think, folks? You want to move on?
Yeah.
Leave it be for now?
Yeah, yes.
I think I would use our creative capital on substantive changes to campgrounds if we're gonna try to suggest anything for May.
So
Yeah, we did that. You weren't at that meeting, were you?
No, I think I missed that one, but
You
I
did.
know that's, I mean, I've been left those conversations, but
Okay.
what if an applicant comes through and goes through the land use ordinance, gets the permit? Couldn't we apply those definitions? And if you go to the site plan, you have to go through site plan, we use those definitions.
Yeah,
Actually, there's inconsistencies between them when you look at them each other. But if you just follow the logic of which way the applicant came into and got the work going, just follow those definitions. Is that too simplistic approach?
no. And the more, remember, when in doubt, the more restrictive applies.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yep.
Yeah.
So what Jesse's gonna tell them is, hey, I don't care what it says under the other one. You have to meet both, because the more restrictive applies.
Would it apply if someone who comes in under just a land use application and he gets stuck with the more restrictive one in the site plan? I don't think so, no.
No,
No, okay,
it only applies if you're subject to both.
Yep.
okay.
and am I right that everybody who who's subject to the site plan is also subject to land use? Right.
Yes.
Everybody is subject to land use, and then only, I don't know, big projects are site plan.
Correct.
And commercial.
Well, right.
So
One of the big mistakes was taking the site plan out of the land use ordinance. We know that, so.
I think that's a huge mistake.
so should we mention to Jeff Crafts when he was here, remind him that we're going to go through both? Aren't we going through both plans? Or
He
assume
is
he-
aware.
He is
I think-
aware. Okay.
I think the
assumed he
attorney
was.
brought it up, didn't they? So they should be aware, but should he be reminded of that so he doesn't think we'd sandbagged him suddenly?
I can certainly remind him again. Yes.
That's all I'm asking.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you're ready to move on, I wanted to do a similar discussion, probably not take so long, but on the word building and structure.
Okay.
Okay,
In site plan review ordinance, the term is building.
I like structure myself, but okay.
Structure
Yes.
is always.
Just
used in
as the word.
I've ever seen.
Where's building? Okay, yep.
And for some reason, in the site plan review ordinance, they've gone to building. I don't know why.
Yeah, any permanent structure having one or more floors and a roof, which is used for the housing or enclosure of persons, animals, or property. When any portion thereof is separated by a division wall without opening, then each such portion shall be deemed a separate building. Well, that's interesting. And there's nothing for building in the LUO.
No.
No, because it's stupid. I'll tell you, let me give you one example. In the site plan review ordinance, Article 2, it says, it talks about buildings and structures. So it says in Article 2, the construction or placement of any new building or structure. I don't know, I'm not that smart. I'm smart, but I'm not that smart. I don't know what the difference is between the two. Does anybody know? I
No
mean,
definition. Others.
I went to the Black's Law Dictionary and my Chambers Dictionary, which is English, and then I've got a Webster's around here, which is American. And I couldn't see the difference.
It's also just bad writing because it says building or structure many times, but then also sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it says, like in paragraph 7 there, it says existing residential structure without building, but then paragraph 8 goes back to building or structure.
Right, so I think a structure, it's like the world's tallest building versus the world's tallest structure. For many years, the world's tallest structure was the CN Tower in Toronto, but it was not the world's tallest building. Because it was just a needle, right? And
Right, yeah.
all concrete. You could go up, there's a restaurant and stuff, but then there was a communications tower. But the building was the World Trade Center. That's all taken over by something in Kuala Lumpur now, and the Trade Center got knocked down. But there was a difference between building or structure. But if you look at it for our purposes in this ordinance, is there a substantive difference? I couldn't tell.
Okay, well, what about a cell tower?
That's a structure, not a building.
Structure.
And so is it important for us to distinguish between, I would say it's about like habitability, that structures are not necessarily habitable, but a building is necessarily habitable.
Yeah, definitely. And not habitable, but certainly could enclose something. And I think that's the difference. And so a chicken coop is not habitable by humans. It is by
Right.
chickens. And it's a building. Whereas a tower does not enclose anything and therefore is a structure. So there's a difference in that way. But in the way that it's used in the ordinance, I think it just means structure.
So,
And that the subset of that are buildings. And they're also captured because they are structures.
Right.
right. And structure in the LUO also refers to decks, patios, and satellite dishes, and stuff like that. Whereas
Exactly.
nothing under the building, there's no decks, it's just something, enclosure for persons, animals, or property.
Right. But I guess my point is to Brett's earlier point, we want to be really careful here. I don't want to make a mistake if you're going to start changing every time and it's used 55 times, according to my word search. I would want to make sure that each one of those, could be that they could be building or structure. It's a lot of work.
And why wouldn't structure be the catch-all there?
It would include building,
Okay,
but I just would want to make sure that building is not differentiated somewheres as opposed to a structure. For the examples you mentioned, things like decks and patios and towers. Is there a need to regulate them different in some reason? And why did they put it here in the first place? I don't know.
How about the platforms that we were just speaking of and pointing?
Yeah, good point. That's a structure, not a building.
Structure.
It's a good
Yeah.
point. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, I guess the thing is, I just don't know. And my question is, do you want me or Jesse to do another deep dive into analyzing that or push that off too?
so it would require going through the site plan review
No, just
Ordinance.
these. Yeah, the whole thing,
and,
yeah,
and check everything for where it says building
and
and
structure.
make sure that structure applies and change it.
Mhm.
Right,
Well, right, and it's definitely
I'll-
not everywhere because, like, building permit is a term that's used a lot. And
Right.
I don't think we probably want to leave that as building permit, which is a different thing than I don't know what a structure permit is, but like so building will remain in there. It's just that when it's used instead of structure.
Right.
Right.
I'd rather have structures for the reason the chairman mentioned, because, for example, if you say including accessory structures, well, that would include buildings. Right now, it usually says buildings and structures. Well, there's no need to have 2 extra words if you don't need them.
Right.
And you always want to include structures because you you don't want to have a tower, an accessory tower outside of your house and say, oh, it's not a building, so we didn't mean to include that.
Right.
Right.
So if you say buildings, that's not going to include structures, but if you say structures, that is going to include buildings.
And so
Are
would you
there
change the
times when
definition?
just talking about buildings? Pretty rare. So
Yeah.
one example would be the one I think Lawson talked about, habitability. You
Right.
wouldn't have a habitable structure, but I don't know. I'd have to analyze the whole thing.
Would you change accessory building to accessory structure and building
Yeah.
footprint to structure footprint?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of case law that I've read. I must have read 24 cases on accessory structures. I've never read one on accessory building.
So how difficult is it really going to be to change it? Because I think we should.
Not that hard. It just takes some time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right. There are 54 uses of the word building.
I
And,
had 55, but yeah.
Right.
and so probably half of those are no-brainers, and then half of them are brainers that require some.
Well, I guess the reason I didn't go through and do it is that I thought that the board, A, might want to comment on it, and B, did we want to is this substantive enough that we didn't want to do it?
I don't see where that's the case, the latter. I think it's basic, to me, it comes under basic housekeeping in a way.
It does to me, but
Yeah.
that's up to the board.
I agree.
Well, let's do that then.
All right, if you think it's basic housekeeping, I'll do it, and I'll give you a version that is clean. If Jesse, I have to ask Jesse to send it to me, but I'll give you a site plan review ordinance that's clean, the whole thing, except for a red line on the words building and structure. And then you can focus on that building and structure.
Okay, what do the others think? Any comments, anybody? Does it make sense to do it?
I think so.
Brett gives a thumbs up.
It makes sense to do it, except I'm not quite sure what James is offering us. Are you just highlighting the issues, or are you going to give solutions to the conflict in the word, or suggested solutions to the
Yeah,
conflict?
I'm gonna give you a suggested solution. I think it'd be real simple. I'll just do delete and underline for, but I'll just look at those terms.
Okay,
Just those terms.
I interpret what you said slightly different. You were just going to highlight it and put it back on our desk.
No, I'll give you a memo and it'll,
Okay, thank you, James.
so the rest of it, Mr. Chairman, if you want to take, we're gonna ignore the other thing, substantially commenced till later. I'll give you a memo on that. The rest of them, they're pretty self-explanatory.
One thing I saw, James, and it's not a definition itself. It's just in the heading of the two, the LUO and the site plan. And in LUO, terms not defined herein shall be defined according to the latest version of Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. As used in this ordinance, the following definition shall apply. Okay. But in the site plan, it says all words not defined herein shall carry their customary and usual meanings.
That's a mistake.
Do we want to say
Yes,
one or the other in both?
yeah, you do.
Okay, which one do we want?
You want the dictionary one,
That's what I thought too. Okay, good.
but you gotta have a dictionary and you have to be a little careful because in Mount Desert, they forget to say or most recent edition. So they have like the 6th edition and then they always gotta go back to the 6th
Oh,
edition.
okay. Yeah,
So pick a dictionary that you like.
it's just the
Merriam-Webster's.
latest version. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to go for the OED, so Merriam-Webster's fine with me.
I have Chambers, but it's British, so
Chambers.
Chambers Dictionary. That's what I use every day.
Is that up in Nova Scotia or something?
Now it's here on my desk, but I also have the 7th edition of the Black's Law Dictionary.
I have Google.
I Google too. Yeah. But I tell you one thing, I don't speak American.
I just
Okay.
pick up my phone and ask it for a word.
Can we say that all words not defined herein shall carry their customary and usual meanings according to Google?
That's a good way to start a fight.
Yep.
Yeah, right?
According to the Facebook meme. some
Yes,
Facebook
exactly.
memes,
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
we go.
As defined by the most popular meme available.
Okay. So what, folks, board, you want to go through these at all, or do we think we're all set with them and James can come back to us with all these other changes?
James, I don't think we need to go through them one by one. The ones we talked about seem to make sense to me. But I do have a question about the difference between superfluous given definition and similar or same definition. Does that just mean that it's not used at all?
Now, superfluous is superfluous. It's Mark, you used to write for the paper. It's
Like not necessary.
it doesn't add any extra value by you. It's just extra
That would make sense.
fluff. And
I
the
see. So
ones-
we define setback, and then we don't need to define setback front, rear, and
Yeah.
side.
You do in other ordinances, not in Tremont's ordinance, but in other ordinance, they'll be very specific and say, for example, something different about the front setback. For example, in my district where my house is on Prospect Avenue, in the front setback, the setback is measured differently. And it says the front setbacks shall be measured to, and then it has this whole deal about lot lines versus the edge of the road. And so my lot goes to the middle of the road and not the edge of the road. And I'm cheated out of 12 feet or something in my zone and 3 or 4 other of the 40 zones of Bar Harbor. So you have to break it down in some towns between front setback, rear setback, and side setback. But in your ordinance, you don't do that. I think setback's good enough. So it's added stuff that you don't really need.
You okay with that, Lawson?
Yep,
Makes
thank
sense
you.
to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Anything else anybody wants, anything else that anybody wants to point out? I guess not. So we all set here?
Mhm.
What's our
Jesse,
timeline?
Did you
Um,
get it to us yesterday?
Yeah. I was gonna say, if you're still shooting for May for any of these changes, then I would say that these changes we've just asked James for should be the last edit, so to speak, and then you approve them at the next meeting and then we're done for May.
Yep, I was wondering about that timeline. Okay. You think you can get it to us before that March 23rd meeting?
Oh, yeah, March 23rd, yeah. How much before?
Uh,
Preferably the 18th.
Is
Yeah,
that what, is that the Thursday or the
yeah, Thursday.
Thursday,
What time?
before noon?
or noon.
So, Mr. Chairman, that's just going to be a memo. So Jesse will email me a clean version of the site plan review ordinance
Okay,
in Word. And I will just do underline and for delete and insert, do a red line on the terms structure and building. And that's all I'm doing.
okay. You're making recommendations too, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
but the recommendation usually will be to delete it or,
Right.
okay. Good enough. Everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you, James. You disappeared.
I'm marking it on my
Must be
calendar,
ti-
otherwise it
Must
doesn't
be
happen.
time for Oak Island or something.
Yeah, that's at 9, so I got lots of time.
Okay,
I'm putting it on my calendar. If I don't put it on my calendar right away, I forget to do it.
We're gonna have
Okay.
to buy him a box of cigars.
I had a root canal today, so I'm not as friendly as I usually am.
Out.
No comment. Okay, if we're done with that, if nobody else has anything else to mention to James, we'll move right on. CEO issues, none.
Wait,
Well, I wonder if I
wait,
can.
I have a question.
Whoa,
for Jay.
hold on. You're talking once. Jeff Young?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right place to ask this question, but James, you stated a few weeks ago that it would be a conflict for you to represent both our Board of Appeals and us
On the same application.
on the same application.
And I
So-
wanted to mention that, Mr. Chairman, as well, because
Because
tonight,
I wanted to say to, well, Jesse's here, now you are now our assistant town manager, right? Or yeah.
Yep.
So while Jesse's here, I was wondering if this board would want some sort of counsel with the upcoming 2 camp applications. Because obviously we know Crafts is coming in with Bear there, and we might be flying, as they say, bare ass if we didn't have counsel with us through that application. And then the other application for Acadia Wilderness is such a large, cumbersome application. We might want to request counsel there. And so, I don't know how you do that in the town, just the general question. And then from my hearing from James is he can't do both.
I can do the larger one.
Mhm.
The other one I already started on representing the Board of Appeals.
Right. So
So that's
what
why
happened?
tonight I didn't want to jump in on anything.
Did you
What
have?
what happens if the other one goes to appeal?
Which one?
The bigger one.
Acadia
Then you're gonna
Wilderness.
get a new lawyer. You make up your mind. I can either help you guys in general, with the exception of the one that Crafts is doing, which I think is the better plan. And then you get a different lawyer for the Board of Appeals.
What do you think about that, Jesse?
Yeah.
It means money.
Another option, maybe it's an option, I don't know. And I don't know if this is a good idea or not. What if we had a different lawyer who advised us on both the campground applications so that James could advise the Board of
Board of
Appeals
Appeals.
for both campground applications?
That might make sense because once the attorney gets familiarized with the ordinances, which he or she would have to do, they wouldn't have to go through it again for the second one.
It's a good idea. It's not good for me. I lose money that way.
Right, that's why yeah.
It's a good idea.
We'll take up a collection, James.
Because of the familiarity with the ordinance. I think that's an excellent idea.
So
So Mark-
JC, would we need selectmen approval for that? How does that work?
I believe so, because you had them authorize James for this work. So I believe
Right.
they authorize an attorney to be present for those meetings as well. But I'll double check with Chris in the morning.
And it depends on your town. Normally, they ask town manager and town manager okays it.
Yeah. I'll check with him in the morning.
All right, and
Okay.
let me know, Jesse, if you help you get somebody.
Okay. Jeff, does that satisfy you?
What satisfies me is we have counsel at the end of the day.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot about that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Mark.
Yes.
Should James recuse himself anytime that we are speaking with, anything from Pointy Head?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I didn't say anything tonight for that reason.
Yeah.
Listen, but
I did. Yep, okay.
Okay.
by the way, Mr. Chairman, just on that point that Jeff raised, I don't want to belabor it, but I expressed this to the town manager previously. I think every time you have a big application before the planning board, you should have counsel. And if someone comes with a lawyer, you definitely want a lawyer then.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I don't think, as long as I've been on the board, we have not done that. And,
It's a, yeah,
and
I'm
I don't know
surprised.
whether it's been done before. I think maybe, have you advised them at
Yeah,
all?
on several occasions, but only on things that were a mess. You know, big messes
Yeah.
or controversial from the start.
Okay. Good point.
Subdivisions, some subdivisions, putting boat repair shops in residential areas, things like that. I knew the
Okay.
lawsuit was coming, so I get in on the ground floor.
So Jesse, you'll talk to Chris tomorrow and find out
Yep.
what we need to do. Okay.
Yep.
And maybe he'll just be able
Are
to.
we
approve it.
formally asking that we have counsel at both of these?
You
Mark?
want, you want a motion, Jesse?
Yeah. That'd be
Okay, that makes sense. I'll take a motion there, Jeff.
I would move that we request the town provide counsel to the planning board for the upcoming applications of Pointy Head and Acadia Woods,
I think it's Acadia Wilderness Campground.
Acadia Wilderness.
I second that.
Okay, motion is second on the table to request that we have legal counsel available at deliberations on
Can I-
Pointy Head.
Can I ask that Marjorie withdraw her second, ask someone else to second it?
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Well, yeah, because,
I don't know
yeah.
how it
Thank
works.
you. Thank you, Jeff. I forgot.
Okay.
I'm happy to second.
Okay, motion and second on the table to, so Marjorie, you won't vote. To request that we have counsel at meetings on the two campground proposals before us. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Lawson?
Aye.
Brett?
Aye.
That's a yes? Yep.
Yep.
And myself, yes. Marjorie, you gonna abstain? Okay, makes sense. Okay. 401. Okay, we got that out of the way. Anything else? Okay, anybody have any others? Jesse, I see our meetings are now posted on YouTube. I didn't know that was happening.
Chris mentioned that he was thinking about it, but I wasn't aware it had started yet.
Yeah, I saw our last two meetings had been posted. I just
Okay.
would have been good if we would have known about that and beforehand.
Yeah, I would have worn a jacket and tie.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's it, I guess, unless somebody has anything else to mention. Take a motion to set the date for the next meeting in March, Tuesday, March 23rd. Oh, I do have one other thing. When we get around to, we're doing this by Zoom. When we get around to actually doing a public hearing, I'm afraid in both these campgrounds, we're gonna find it's gonna be difficult to do by Zoom again. So we may want to think ahead that maybe consider the community center again.
That I agree, Mark. I think that, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a public health expert, so I sort of defer to anybody who is, but assuming that we can do that safely, which I think that we can, I think that it makes the most sense. It'll be easier to conduct and it'll make more sense to do it in person.
Right. Okay, and some of us will have had our vaccines by then. I got the first dose last week. I think Jeff has both.
Yeah, I got both.
Nice.
All right, motion set the date for the next meeting.
I'll make a motion to set the date for the next meeting to be March 23rd, 2021, and propose that we meet by a Zoom on the 23rd.
Okay, second somebody?
Second.
Motion and second on the table to meet Tuesday, March 23rd, 6 o'clock by Zoom. Any discussion? Hearing none? All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Lawson?
Aye.
Brett?
Aye.
Marjorie?
Aye.
Myself, yes. Okay, 5-0, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Just quick question. Do we know if either one of these campgrounds is coming on the calendar on the 23rd? Jesse?
Don't know yet. Greg asked me for the deadline for the 23rd and for the first meeting in April. So I know he's shooting for one of those.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I just wonder if you want to discuss this, the definitions, maybe you could put me first at that meeting and then, so I don't have to.
we
I
could
mean,
do
I
that.
love building, but you know,
We could make that adjustment.
okay, good.
Yeah, his clock will be running through the whole meeting, so this is very important.
Yeah, I know. Well, I thought about that earlier, but the agenda is already set, so. Okay, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Somebody? Okay, motion is second on the table to adjourn. All in favor, Jeff Young,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Brett,
All right.
Marjorie,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay, thanks, folks.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you.